An ant sticks effortlessly to glass. The gecko can also do that, though it's much heavier. We'll look at how that's done. And from the ant, learn how being dumb doesn't stop you doing clever things.
It's amazing how rapidly they can attach and detach the feet. Just milliseconds from full swing to being attached completely. They're so dynamic. You know, if you were looking at this animal from above, you'd think it was running on the floor, not on the side of a polished perspex surface. The gecko is pretty sticky, so I'm pulling here. I don't want to hurt the animal, but it can move this big plexiglass plate around quite easily. So one gecko here can lift probably a kilogram's worth of weight without injuring the animal. So to pull it off of a wall is quite difficult. And how they manage to be so sticky is a problem that has really fascinated scientists for well over a century.
So we're interested in discovering the principles, the ideas about how you can grab onto any surface, and then trying to transfer that information to engineers to try to inspire them to build not only new adhesives, but adhesives that maybe could someday be used on a robot. In particular, we like to think that someday you could make a robot that could undergo search and rescue, so that find individuals in earthquakes or in fires, or they're trapped as a result of some terrible accident. And you could have a swarm of these robots going anywhere, climb up the sides of walls, and find the individuals very quickly.
There are 850 different kinds of geckos, and each one has a different type of foot. In fact, taxonomists classify geckos primarily on the structure of their feet. This one is pachydactylous. It's a broad, thick toe. It's just amazing. How can they stick to such a smooth surface? One of the first hypotheses was that maybe the geckos have little suction cups in their feet. That turns out not to be true, that their little toes can stick even in a vacuum or underwater. Another hypothesis was maybe they have little microscopic hooks, but as you can see, it can stick to the smoothest of surfaces. Another possibility is that perhaps there's a thin film of liquid in between the gecko's foot and the surface, and the geckos stick by capillary action, like many insects do. But if we lift up the gecko's feet, we can see there's no footprint left behind.
We're also looking to ants. They use a glue. They have claws that can grab on when it's rough, but a pad that comes out and sticks on very tightly with glue so they can maneuver on different surfaces. So here's the foot of an ant. Here's the pad pulled back in. And that, when it comes out, it secretes the glue and then grabs on. And you can see that the animal's here running upside down. And there are the claws. It's a flat surface so they don't grab in, and the pad comes out and it sticks by the pad. That's wet adhesion. That's very different from what we see in the gecko.
Well, on the bottom of its feet, you can see that there are little white strips, and each one of those strips is actually a brush of about 20,000 microscopic hairs, and that's the sticky part of the gecko's foot. Well, it's well known that the geckos had these microscopic hairs, but what wasn't clear was what the mechanism was that makes the hair sticky. I mean, after all, our hair isn't sticky, or at least not, hopefully not. But the gecko's hairs are incredibly sticky, and we wanted to know how that works. Well, what we found was that geckos stick by this incredibly weak force. This was really a surprising result, that they stick by a force that's called van der Waals force. And these are forces that happen just when two surfaces get very, very close. So what's happening here in the gecko's toes is those millions of hairs have thousands of smaller tips on each hair. And those smaller tips are so close to this surface that they actually bond at the quantum atomic level. These millions of microscopic tips are able to get so close to the wall that they literally become one with the wall at the quantum scale. Each one of those atomic interactions is quite weak. Billions of them together can be extremely strong. You might wonder, how is it that the gecko can get all of these hairs off if they're so incredibly sticky? And we discovered that when the angle that this hair makes with the surface increases, these little tips begin to peel off. You can see that in the toes. They peel their toes up from the tip first. They have the most double-jointed toes in the world. They can curl them up like this. You know, and obviously I can't do this with my real finger, but they curl them up just like you would peel a piece of tape off the wall. It attaches so gently and detaches so easily that you can imagine using it for applications like nanosurgery, where you might need to pull on a blood vessel or a nerve very gently and not do any damage.
Oh yeah. We take the animals and we put them on treadmills. Here's a small one, a miniature treadmill. And then we run it and we try to look at their motion. What's really surprising when we looked at this diversity of animals, that 2, 4, 6, 8, and even 44-legged runners all seem to move the same way. They all bounce along like a pogo stick, despite the fact they look totally different. That single idea then can be used to make very simple, effective robots. This is named Rex, the robot hexapod, and it runs in the field very much like you see insects and geckos and even dogs or you. It bounces along as it's running in the field. This is the Rex going over a pipe. Doesn't see anything, doesn't feel anything, no brains, just goes over that surface because it has legs. But what it can't do yet, and that's the next step, is to be able to climb up surfaces. So we're studying the adhesive of the gecko because it's really special, and we want to add that to designing the feet of the next generation of robots.
That's pretty much it. That's the process we have so far for making the synthetic gecko hairs. In this region here, made of silicone rubber, is approximately 1 million small bumps. Each of these bumps, we found, has about the same adhesion as the nano bumps on the real gecko. So this is our first steps towards building the synthetic gecko array. But you need an electron microscope to see them. They stick very well to glass, and they give a pretty decent adhesion. These are one of our first engineering models for the tips of the toes of the gecko hairs.
We've done some work with a company called iRobot, and they've made a robot they call the Mecho Gecko that uses a glue, but successfully peels from the surface, and they were able to get a robot to climb up a wall. The problem is that it uses glue, not like the gecko, and the glue gets dirty very quickly, whereas the gecko can self-clean, although we don't know quite how it does it yet.
Yeah, they're quick. Well, if this gecko had tape or any other kind of adhesive on the bottom of its feet, it would be done for. But they clean themselves off quite easily. The adhesive doesn't seem to attract dirt. We don't know why they're self-cleaning. We have a few ideas, but we're working on that this summer.
Shortly after filming this, a student at Stanford University designed this sticky bot, inspired by the gecko. It sticks because of the shape of the hairs on its feet, only these are not yet as fine as those on the real animal. Nonetheless, Sticky Bot shows a remarkable likeness with the real gecko. In order to stick and come loose, it needs to place its feet in exactly the same way.
No, they're doing really well.
Yes, it's amazing how well they cope they really thrive in the lab, under lab conditions.
Yes.
This worker is feeding a brood larva, or at least exchanging food. If you recognize an individual by marking them and you follow them for a while, you'll see that they're faithful just to a particular zone in the nest. And all these phenomena are not down to somebody having a plan and telling the ants what to do.
Oh, there's no leader.
There's no leader. I think they're really great creatures, and when you study them, they really open their secrets for you. You always find something very interesting.
This is where we build stuff. This is where we build robots. Okay, back here we've got In 1951, a guy called Gray Walter, who worked at the Burden Neurological Institute, started with building simple robots. The idea was to see how you could get complexity from something which was relatively simple. And this is a recreation that we've made here of the 1951 Gray Walter robot. We've also got robots in various states of undress. The problem is with conventional robots, like this heavy-duty robot here, is that it takes a lot of batteries to make it work, and it's built of gearboxes. And long-term, we'd like to build robots that don't necessarily look like robots. There it is, moving away quite happily towards the sun. And each of these photocells is coupled to the opposite wheel. If you've got energy on both sides, then both wheels will be triggered more or less at the same speed. But when one of the sides gets into the shade, then there's more energy on this side, so the opposite wheel is triggered. That means you'll move away from the object. So as long as you're going towards the sun, it will carry out a form of obstacle avoidance, but with no brain. So we're quite interested. One of the themes of the laboratory is how dumb can you be and still be useful? So this is quite interesting. These are robots, but they'll be part of a fleet of robots which will allow us to do experiments with self-organization. How do you get systems to build structures when each element of each robot can only communicate, say, that much, but you want to build a structure which is this big?
This is a colony of the ant Leptothorax albipenis. In nature they live in fissures in rocks which are approximately flat, and that makes them ideal for studying the behavior of the whole colony. You can see here that smaller items seem to be in the middle of this pattern, while bigger items are on the periphery. This pattern is not the result of simply the queen who tends to be in the middle of the pattern laying eggs. We know that because when we provoke an emigration by putting a new nest close to this one and disturbing the present one so that ants go to the new nest, when they go into this new nest, they resort the brood in exactly the same pattern. The phenomenon we're interested here is how ants manage to sort their brood in that way. Why is it interesting? Because it's a collective level phenomenon. It's beyond the scope of an individual ant. By that I don't mean that the ants are stupid, but just the pattern is too big for their overview. However, without a central controller, they manage to sort the brood. So there isn't any one individual that has the whole pattern in their mind.
We know that these tiny little guys called Leptothorax ants, very small ants, they're able to take brood and they sort the brood and make sort of concentric circles of different brood types. And we're really interested in how they do that because we'd like to exploit those ideas and put them on robots. So these robots here have been designed, they're quite smart robots, but we've sort of turned the dumbness switch up. So they're pretty stupid. I'm trying to make them as dumb as possible, and yet they're able to carry out this particular job of sorting. if you look at ants, you find that they seem to be suboptimal, that you might have a whole bunch of ants taking eggs from one area and then moving it to another area. And then you get 2 or 3 individuals who decide that once it's been put down, they'll pick it up and take it all the way back and just drop it down again, which is clearly some sort of crazy behavior. It does look bizarre, but they must be doing something which is useful, because ants have been on the planet for whatever 100 million years, so there must be some value in what they're doing. And sure, although it may be difficult to understand what an individual is doing, when you put a whole bunch of them together, then collectively they're able to solve this problem. So here we've got a collection of robots carrying out 4 very, very simple rules, and in the end they're able to sort the white frisbees from the black frisbees. But they don't have cameras on board. They can't talk to each other. The first rule is, let's look at this robot here. If there's nothing around, just keep going. So that's one rule. Another rule is, if you bump into a big thing like a wall, you take a random turn. And I'm waiting for the next one. If, for example, so that's 2 rules. If you're carrying a puck and it's a black one and you bump into another puck, you take it back and you don't do that. Okay, we'll do this one. Okay, so this is the rule. If you're carrying a black puck and you hit another, a puck, it doesn't matter what color it is, you pull it back and then you dump it. If, on the other hand, you're carrying a white puck and you bump into another puck, then you leave the puck where it is. And if you carry out those rules for many, many hours, then you end up with the white pucks being pulled apart and separated from the black pucks. So you don't need a global controller, a central brain to be able to do it. You can still, and if we destroy this, the robots will carry on and resort it again. If we were making very, very small robots, I mean, the sorts of things that it might be, but this is slightly science fiction, so, you know, I don't know. But maybe you have very, very small robot systems in paint, so they can actually move within a paint material. They might be able to look at cracks on, so you paint it over a bridge, for example, and within that bridge, the paint itself has got tiny, tiny robots embedded in it which can move around, perhaps. Of course, it might be that you want to build bigger structures. You might want to have in certain operations, mining operations, things like that, on other planets. And it could be that by using lots of simple robots, it doesn't matter if some of them break down, because there are more of them. They're cheap, they're inexpensive, they offer robustness. Rather than putting all your technology in one robot, which could go wrong, you spread it around, if you like, amongst a whole bunch of robots, and it doesn't matter if a few of them don't work. So if you have one robot in 10, which is not behaving very well, that's 10% of your population. If you have one robot in 100, that's only 1% of the population. So as long as you've got a relatively small number of robots doing the wrong thing, maybe the rest of them will swamp that effect by doing the right thing.